Hi, this is Betty with Beyond the Dalit. I planned on getting this podcast done a few weeks ago and unfortunately ended up with my third case of COVID. Yeah, knocked me on my butt. I gotta admit. Um, so I'm still kind of coming back from that. Um, and the only reason I bring that up is I want to encourage people that, I'm over 65 and I just want to say how grateful I am to the Lord for his faithfulness and through all of this. I mean, I started out with the first bout of COVID I got was was back in 2022, and um and it hit me pretty hard. Um, I thankfully didn't end up in the hospital over it, but I was knocked down for a couple of weeks. And it was in the midst of, at the time, I was still caring for my, my stepmom. So I was living in Central Virginia and I was her sole caregiver. And we had just gone through this major storm. I mean, it was like, I think at that point, I think Virginia had already been called in a state of emergency or something. I mean, the whole state was a hazard because of this storm that had gone through, knocked us out of power for like a week, and my stepmom was well into her 90s, and she was like 97 at the time, and so it was a rough season, and got over that bout, kind of came back from things, and it left me in a state of what I came later to find out was that I had what you call, I guess they call it long COVID, or the extent. I got the extended version. um yeah, the director's cut. Evidently, with and believe me, there's been plenty of commentary on my part throughout all of this. But and again, the only reason I bring it up is to say, you know what, God sees us through, no matter what we're facing. Um, a year ago, I ended up getting COVID just before my son's wedding. And I was just almost in a state of panic, to be perfectly honest about it, because I I was so worried because I was just kind of getting past and recovering from the long COVID symptoms. I was one of those people who the long COVID symptoms weren't diminishing over time; they actually were getting worse over time, and it was a real challenge. It was a real challenge, but um, so last year when I got COVID, it 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 was more of a mental challenge, I think, than anything else. I mean, I was sick. It ended up being a very light case of COVID. I was able to spring back pretty much right away. Thank goodness. A few weeks later, my son got married, and then I went into a season of um, I I I got back to the gym. I did. And what I ended up having to realize was that I still was dealing with what they call post exertional malaise. So it's PEM for short, and it's kind of this thing where you don't even realize. I mean, because you have to exercise. Let's face it, you can't just be sedentary. That's not healthy. And so you know, going back to how I was before I got COVID the first time, as a very active individual. I mean, I I love being active. I loved working out. Um, I had a personal trainer at one time, and I loved the interaction. I loved being at the gym, and I really enjoyed all of that the whole time I was in Virginia with my folks, which was like a 2.5 year period. I like my exercise ball, and I loved my exercise ball. and I worked out every day, for that whole time. Again, until I got COVID. And um and I got to tell you, it's real easy to get frustrated. Especially once you get to be my age. I mean, I'm pushing 66, and and then let's face it, I'm overweight. I've been trying to drop the weight. I was, again, when I was in Virginia, I dropped about 40 pounds, which was fantastic. I felt great, and I had this momentum going on this really great momentum of gaining strength and feeling better, and my health was in a really good place. And then I got hit with COVID. And and I know I'm starting out this podcast on a relatively negative note, but hang in there with me because I am definitely going somewhere with this. I'm not just talking about my experience, because my experience is common. There are others who have been experiencing the same thing, and I really want to I want to come with an encouraging word, and to start with, that encouragement is, hang in there. You're going to make it through this. If you're listening to this, the word of the Lord to you is, you're going to get to the other side of this. There is going to be a restoration. There is going to be a recovery. You're going to receive strength again. You're going to be established again. There's going to be a coming back to yourself kind of time coming ahead of you. Um, but to finish my COVID story, um, so like I said, I had gotten back to the gym. So a year ago, um, last September, I got back to the gym. I'm working through. And then I kind of hit a wall, and it knocked me off my feet for a while. I ended up in exhaustion again, and it was like I'm like, wow, this really felt. I thought I was fully recovered from the long COVID, and I had to realize, oh, I still have this threshold that I thought was gone. So I was still dealing with the PEM, the post exertional malaise. And the thing with that is, you don't feel it all the time. It's not like chronic fatigue syndrome, where it's similar, but it's, which is kind of like, it's really hard to nail down what's really going on. But so there's this fine line between exercising and being healthy about it and being wise, and then it's as if you reach this point, and all of a sudden, without notice, you've gone too far. And it took me like 3 rounds of this, 3 cycles of this, in order to really realize what was going on. And I had to back off completely with my workout at the gym. Um, and And I got to tell you, I was disappointed. I was really disappointed that that's what ended up happening. The last time I went through this, um, and I'm not just talking about the COVID thing. I'm talking about this post exertional malaise, which is the leftovers of the long COVID, which again for me started in 2022. We're halfway through 2025 now. Okay, so this has not been an easy journey. But at the same time, I will say this, through all of this, the Lord has been consistent and faithful to remind me of the promise that He made to me when I didn't even realize it was a promise. And that is back in 2022. It was at the onset of, actually, it was probably 2021, because it would have been at the onset of the Hebraic year 5782. Um, Going into that year, there was this extended word of the Lord that I had gotten, and there were two very specific scripture verses that God gave to me, and I've had to allow Holy Spirit to to readjust and rewire my thinking and my approach to these words that I've gotten in relation to the Hebraic year, where and I'll get into that in a minute, but the main there were two scripture verses, sorry, that the Lord gave me. One was 1 Peter 5:10. It is after you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who's called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, secure, strengthen, and establish you. Okay, and the other verse is Isaiah 43:19. And it says, "For I'm about to do something new. See, I've already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland." Now, again, at the time, I was writing an extended article. Ended up putting it into a book, a PDF that I made available on my website. Um, that's 5782, a prophetic picture. And there were some things that what the Lord was showing me at the time. He was very much impressing on me these two very specific verses. And of course, the one thing I know about the word of the Lord is that it's always unfolding. There's always more to it than what we know when he first, let's say, when the Holy Spirit quickens something, he highlights something to your spirit. There's usually more to it than what you get in that initial revelatory moment. So the Lord began to speak to me concerning these two verses back in 5782, which again was the end of 2021 going into 2022. When it came around again to the following year, and I was seeking the Lord concerning the word of the Lord for 5783, he took me back to this word from 1 Peter. And again, 1 Peter 5:10 says, "After you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who's called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, secure, strengthen, and establish you." Now, I got to tell you, when I came back around the following year, um, I was not real encouraged by that at first. I'm like, oh, because in my mind, you know, 5782, in my mind, the suffering was behind me. Now we're going forward into the restoration. Little did I know that I was going into a time of, we'll call it, suffering. I had no clue what was ahead. So at the time when I got that word in 1 Peter 5:10, I had not contacted COVID as of yet. So that was like September, or at least even before September when I got that word. So it's like August, July or August of 2021, as I was praying in for, the head of the year and all of that. And this is what the Lord gave me. I read it all out. I put it out there. And then, you know, fast forward 5, 6 months later, okay, I end up with COVID. And and again, at the time, I wasn't expecting to go into a time of suffering. I wasn't expecting to go into a time of affliction or difficulty or diminishing. I was already in a time of being strengthened. I was. I was at the healthiest place I had been in a long time. I had recovered from some prior health issues. I was in a really, really good place physically. And thank goodness I was when I ended up contacting COVID in I was like January, February of 2022. And and again, I recover, get to like around this time of the year, so it's like April going into May. By the time we got to Passover that year, 5782, so it's 2022, um, I'm sitting in the hospital emergency room with my stepmom on the first day of Passover. And she gets diagnosed with congestive heart failure. They end up sending her home on hospice. And by the time we got to the middle of June, she was gone. But again, my life was not necessarily in a really bad place, but I didn't realize that I was going into a a very declining kind of a season, and I really didn't realize that. Um, and one of the things the Lord was showing me in that 5783, what was leading up to that year, um, there was some imagery the Lord was giving me around that 1 Peter 5:10, the stages of recovery. And one of those was as if he was bringing a ship back into port. He was kind of, a ship that either needed repair or it had been in war, whatever that was, and it was being brought back to port for the purpose of getting repaired and renewed and all of that. And then the second phase of that was being anchored down in such a way that so that you could withstand a storm. So like if you picture the imagery of let's say a young tree and you're going into a stormy season, or you're in an area like here in the Midwest, we don't get hurricanes, but we do get tornadoes. And it's really important that young trees are anchored. So there's these supports that keep them from getting uprooted during that tornado season. And that was the imagery that I was getting. First is the first stage of this is like a ship being brought back to port so that it can be repaired. It's lifted up out of the water. It's put in a place where ultimately it can be restored. The second stage is now you're being anchored down like a tree that needs to be anchored down so that it can withstand the storm that's coming. And again, I'm getting this stuff prophetically. I'm getting it, but I'm not really getting it. You hear what I'm saying? I'm not really getting the fact that I'm going to go into something that's going to be like a storm. There's this storm coming. Well, I have no clue, really, that the storm that was coming for me came as long COVID. That was the storm I had to endure. That's the storm I've been through. Now, everybody else who's listening, there might be a handful of you that have had similar, maybe it's a physical thing, but for others, maybe it's the loss of a job, whatever it is. The third phase of that pictures for 5783 had to do with strengthening your core. Now, when I think of strengthening your core, to me, that's, because my mind it goes to the gym. It goes to, okay, what exercises do I do to strengthen core? Well, the interesting thing is when your core is strengthened, if you focus on core strength and firming up your core, which is your midsection, let's say you're the trunk of your body, you're strengthening that, everything else seems to fall into place. Okay? So it's when you've got a really strong core, it helps with your balance, it helps with other things. So if you think about that, let's say from a spiritual standpoint, the next phase of that is even though you're in the midst of this storm, God has you anchored in such a way that you're not going to get uprooted, you're not going to be damaged, you're going to survive this. That's the encouraging part. And then he's saying, okay, and through this, I'm going to strengthen you in your core, in the innermost part of your being, in that central area of your life. I'm going to strengthen you. That's what God has been saying. I'm going to strengthen you so that when it's time to go forward, your whole core is going to, the the part that really carries you around and keeps everything else in your life together, that part of you is going to be strengthened so that now we get to the next phase. The next phase is God is creating a new path. He's laying a new foundation so that when this season of suffering, this season of diminishing, whatever language you want to put to it, this time of difficulty or whatever is over, and God sets us on this new path, we're now going to be able to go forward in a new way. Now, for some people, this time has been more of a mental and emotional, maybe even financial. Um, there have been challenges one after another, and just when you think it's over, you get hit back down again. That's what this season has been like. So it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like when storms are, and we have this, for those, again, those who are in the Midwest or in the South, um, like Kansas and Arkansas and all that, Oklahoma, they get hit with tornadoes even much more than we do here in Illinois. Um, Sometimes you'll have a series of these storms, one behind the other, and you're just getting inundated one after another. And just when you think, oh, well, I survived that storm, but oh my gosh, here's another one, and then another one, and then another one, and it's like, I don't know how much more you know. Well, it took the roof up. Well, now we have to replace the roof, or whatever that looks like. There has been one storm after another over these last few years, and it's been hard hitting on multiple levels. For some, this has been an emotional challenge. Um, and I gotta say, I really want to make sure I communicate this in a in an encouraging way. There's no there's no finger pointing here. There's no um there's no condemning. This isn't to condemn anyone, but some of us have a difficulty processing emotional difficulties. Situations um, that demand something from us, and sometimes we're in situations where we're just getting hit so hard on an emotional level, and even if mental, I'll say mental anguish and emotional difficulty, where you're just getting, it's constant, it's continual. It's like being on a job where there's just no mental rest, you know, um, where you're just being inundated day and night and day and night and day and night, and it's relentless. There's been a lot of that going on, and in the midst of all of this, there are those who have had to go, you know what? I have to withdraw. If I'm going to make it, I have to withdraw myself from that situation. Sometimes it's been the people that we've been around, that we've been connected with, and I have to say, I've looked back on my life, and I have had to, um, I've had to step away from certain relationships, that where at one time we were really close, we were very connected. There were those I was even in ministry with at some point, and for whatever reason, again, this is not about pointing the finger. It's not about saying, well, I was right and they were wrong, or we didn't get along. It's not about that. It's I had to assess the situation and go, are we walking in the same direction? It's kind of like where scripture says two can only walk together as long as they agree. So it's like you can only walk together with someone when you're in agreement. When you're, hey, we're both going to this one place. Yeah, we can ride together. We can carpool, so to speak. Why? Because our destination is the same. Okay? Sometimes we have people in our lives that are only there to get to a certain point, and then they go off and go do their thing. We go off and go do ours, and not every relationship is intended to be, not every interaction and every connection we have with people is intended to be a lifelong connection. And it's going to be really, really difficult going forward if you're insistent on holding on to relationships that God is calling you to let go of, or God is just simply leading you in another direction. And maybe that relationship, maybe your interaction with them just has to change on a certain level. And that takes me um to one of the other things that God has been saying in the midst of all of this is we're in a season of endings. And one of the things the Lord has made very, very clear to me over these last 3 years is this is the season of endings. It's there, there's everything is ending here. The things that need to end, they're ending here. Um, and sometimes we think, well, things are only ending because a new thing is beginning. Well, that may be true, and I believe it is. There are some new things that are coming, which takes me back to that verse um, from Isaiah 43:19 about I'm doing something new. Do you not know it? Do you not perceive it? My response is no, I really don't. Um, but I'm going to ask you to open my eyes so that I can see it. Because when things are ending, in order for a new thing to begin, there has to be an ending. And I there's a book I read a number of years ago now, and I absolutely love this book. I've revisited a couple of times. It's Henry Cloud, the author of one of the authors of the Boundaries book, wrote this, and the book is called Necessary Endings. And if you're, I got to tell you, it's phenomenal. It really is good. It helps to put things into perspective, into what are the things we need to let go of, and how to recognize that endings are a part of life. You know, death is a part of our earthly reality. I remember as a kid, um, my mother took us to funerals and wakes as I was a kid. And I know there's a lot of parents that don't agree with that. But I will tell you, this is what it taught me. Death is normal. This is going to happen. So it's well, how did Aunt Vera end up in what's going on with her? What's I saw her body in a casket, open casket wake. Okay. Well, it was like one of the first ones I went to, and I'll never forget it. Now, I wasn't scarred by it. My mom prepared me. She prepared us for going. Aunt Vera passed away. That means she died. Now, this is what we do. We go, they put the body in a casket. She's not alive in there. She's not in the body anymore. It's just her, just the shell, okay? And she's not asleep. She's dead. This is what death looks like. This is what death looks like. And I got to tell you, it prepared me in a way that I really have to look back on and be very grateful for, because it is one of the things in my life that has helped me to accept the fact that death is a part of our earthly existence. It's just one of the things we have to deal with on this end of eternity. Um, anyway, having said that, there are things that have to end. There's some things have to die in order for the new life to come forward. No, I really didn't appreciate it when my fiance um died suddenly. A week after he proposed, he was gone. No, I didn't appreciate that. And that was a really, really difficult passing. It was a very difficult ending, um, because I thought I was going into a new beginning with a new husband and a new friend and a life partner. And and suddenly that was now gone, and I had to go through a time. I had to go through a time of mourning. I had to grieve the loss. I had to miss him, and I had to get over the loss. I had to process that loss. Now, here's the thing about grief. Um, it's really important for us to grieve our losses, because if we don't, we can get stuck. It kind of sometimes, if we fail to grieve over the things we've lost, it actually will prevent us from fully going into the new thing. Okay? Um, in order for us to really embrace where God is taking us, there are some things we have to grieve the loss of now. Okay? Um, when I was living in Virginia, and I got to tell you, I loved, in a lot of ways, I loved being there. The downside to it is I was 900 miles away from the rest of my family because my folks had chosen to retire in Central Virginia. The rest of my family was in Illinois. So I didn't want to be away from my family, but I would have loved to have been able to stay there in some capacity. I liked our house. I liked our home there. You know, we had 3 acres in a wooded area in rural Virginia that was in the foothills of the Blue Ridge. It was a beautiful, absolutely beautifully stunning place to live. And I loved being there, in a lot of ways. And I very definitely had to grieve the loss of the home that was there. Um, and you know, even though I was only there for a short time, was only there for a few years, it was my home. It wasn't just their home, it was my home. I moved in so that I could care for them. It was my home. And when they passed, we had to sell the house and I had to move back to Illinois. And it wasn't just, oh gee, this is an adjustment. And as you get older, you know, and especially for somebody like me, I'm a nester. You you know, once I kind of build my little nest and I'm settled in now, it very much is a challenge for me to uproot and move again. Um, and I'm being faced with that again. By this time next month, I'll be in a new place. Um, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So all of this to say, we have been in a season of difficult, challenging storms, one after another. And this season we've been in is about to shift. It's about to change. At the same time, sometimes when you're going through challenging circumstances, you kind of bond with the circumstances. You kind of bond with the challenge, as it were. That might seem kind of weird, but and wrong on some level, but we kind of do, you know. You get not just you get used to it, you almost kind of bond with it. Especially if you're wired like me. My whole thing is, you know, let's face this difficulty. Let's face the challenge. And what do I need to do, not just to get through the challenge, but to thrive in the midst of it? What can I gain from having gone through this particular challenge? Well, one of the things that I have gained from this is patience. I will say that patience with myself. Now, I can be patient with you. I can be patient with others. I can be loving and kind and considerate. I'm a very empathic individual. But the one person that I am not as patient with is myself. And I have had to, out of necessity, I've had to pull back and take things slower. I've had to pull the reins back, so to speak, on how I wanted to progress. And I have had to rely on God in ways I didn't have to before. I was always physically strong. I was always able to do pretty much what I wanted to do. And so being put in a position where I not only couldn't do things physically, but I went from being very physically strong to needing a walker because I couldn't catch my breath and I'd get worn out really easy and my legs would give out on me and I'd have to sit down. So I had to have one of those walkers with the wheels on it that has a seat so I can sit, so catch my breath. And I got to tell you, it's very humbling. It's very humbling. I've had to be one of those chubbos that have to ride the cart through Walmart. You know, um, it, it's a have to. Do I want to live that way? No. I want to be physically active. I want to be able, the sun is out. I want to get out there. I used to love to walk, and I would go on these long 3 to 5 mile walks a couple times a week. I mean, I love to walk, but I haven't been able to do that because I don't have the breath for it. I was lucky I could walk. I live in a apartment complex, and I have to park my car um, a pretty good distance from our apartment. And so let's say I've got to walk minimally a half to like 3/4 of a block to get to my car. There's days when I couldn't do that walk, even with my walker. And that was very humbling. And, not to mention very, very, of course, very crippling and very restricting, but having to be okay with that. And I'm not talking about resigning and giving in and going, oh, well, woe is me. I can't do anything. No, it was more about, all right, God, give me the grace to let go. Give me the grace to embrace what you have for me in this season. And I got to tell you, that has not been easy. It has not been easy. It's one of the things that I've had to restrict myself with is eating out. I love to eat out. You got to know that about me. I love eating out, but I've had to restrict that. Um, I have had to, I've had to fashion a workaround um, because I couldn't stand at the stove to sink. Oh my goodness, to cook, and I couldn't stand at the sink to do dishes. I've had to do everything seated, and again, it's a challenge. Um, and I'm not looking for your sympathy. I'm saying these things just to relay to you your situation's probably nothing like mine. But what restrictions have you had to live with? How have you had to navigate and renegotiate and readjust your life to fit the current circumstances that you've been in? And again, if you've been like me, I know God has been saying, I'm not the only one. He told me to put that word out there back in 5782. You're going into a storm. You're going into a time where you're going to be dealing with some real heavy duty difficulties that are going to be very diminishing. It's going to be very limiting. And yes, for me, COVID had a lot to do with it. But for most people, it didn't. For most of the people I'm talking to today, I'm only sharing my particulars so that you can go, well, the specifics of it might not sound the same, but the generalities of it, I bet probably do. It probably rings true in other areas of your life. Okay. So, having said all of that, and I do want to kind of get back around to where am I going with all of this, is when you're in transition, the first stage of the transition is the ending. The second phase of it is a very confusing kind of a part. It's where stuff is going on, but you're not really sure where where to put your foot next. What direction am I going in? And I shared a word a few months ago, I think now, about the imagery the Lord was giving to me was as if we were in like a roundhouse, where you're trains go into it on a track, and then there's this structure. It's kind of an enclosed structure. They go in one direction, and then it's almost like a turntable. Only you're inside this thing, and your whole life is being turned around. And then once you're lined up with the new track, then the doors will open and you will go forward on that new track. And but we're still in this roundhouse. We're still in phase two of transition in this season. We're still in this time of diminishing, so to speak. We've been in this time of dealing with the storms, and some people will call it warfare. It's been, I know Chuck Pierce talks a lot about the warfare season, that this pay decade is a warfare season, and I agree in a lot of ways. Um, but that's his message, not mine. Anyway, so but we have to understand that when you're in transition, there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of I don't knows. There's going to be so, and especially for those of us who heavily rely on Holy Spirit for direction. There hasn't been a lot of specifics right now. And for those of you that are getting it, God bless you, because a lot of us aren't. And I can tell you, a lot of us just simply are not getting it. Things are being very quiet. It's not that God's not speaking to us, because He is, but He's not necessarily telling us about this new path. He's just saying there is one. There's a new path coming. There's a new path coming. There's a new assignment coming. There's a new commissioning coming. There's a new thing coming. And again, it goes back to that word in Isaiah 43:19. I'm about to do something new. It's actually already begun. Don't you see it? No, no, I don't. Why am I not seeing it? Because I'm in this place where 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 the walls are up all around me. I can't see the path in front of me because God hasn't revealed it yet. Okay? My responding, God isn't saying, "Hey, don't you see this? You should see this." That's not what He's saying. He's saying, I've already started something. I'm doing something new in your life. In fact, it's already begun. Don't you see that? Can you see that I'm doing something new? Well, yeah, okay. Yes, I can tell you're doing something new because all the old stuff is dying. Everything is ending here. And but the new thing hasn't started yet. So no, I don't see the new thing, but I do see all the fingerprints of God all over the transition. I can see that things are ending. I can see that I'm in a state of confusion and I don't know what to do next. All I know to do is just keep going. It's that whole just keep swimming, just keep swimming. It's just put one foot in front of the other. Just keep don't we're not making massive changes here, at least not in the moment. We're getting ready for the next stage. Like for me and my household, what that means is we're packing our stuff up. Okay? We're slowly getting ready, but the new place isn't ready yet. We're not released to go into the new place. We're not quite there yet. But this on this side is ending, so we have to be ready so that at a moment's notice we can go forward and we can go into the new thing. But we can't do that yet. We're not released into that yet. The door hasn't been fully opened to that yet. So what do we do in the meantime? Just keep packing. Just keep getting ready. Just keep getting ready for the next shift. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean for the rest of you? What does that mean for those that aren't going through a physical move right now? Maybe you've been working on a project. I mean, I was working on on my new book, which I was hoping to have out, and I'm still hoping to have out by Rosh Hashanah. But I had to put a pause on that project in order to do this and to get ready to move. Um, so, in some respects, we're having to pause some of the work that's intended to go into the next phase, but there's still things to do in the here and now. But some of that, what to do in the here and now, is just rest. It's take it easy and know that there is a shift that's coming. There's another shift coming. Why? Because that's what transition is all about, right? That's what transition is all about. But and here's another piece that goes with this Isaiah 43:19 thing is God is saying, I'm going to make a pathway, a roadway in the wilderness. I'm going to create rivers into the dry wasteland. That wilderness and the wasteland is speaking into this place that we've been in over the last 3 years. It's about God is saying, I am making a beeline for you. I know exactly where you're at, and I know exactly how to bring you out of where you've been. If you've been in, like me, if you've been in this very physically debilitating season, I know exactly how to get to you. I know exactly when I'm going to get to you. I know exactly what I'm going to do to bring restoration to you because that's the promise of 1 Peter 5:10. After after this time of suffering, God is saying, what? I'm the God of all grace. I've called you to my eternal glory in Christ Jesus, and I will do this myself. I'm going to what? Restore, secure, strengthen, and establish. I'm going to do this in you. I'm going to do a new work in you. But and here's the thing. We're not going to be restored back to something we were before. We're going to be restored forward into a new, not just an, I don't like to use the word a new version of ourselves, but that really kind of is what's going on is it's time for a new you. It's time for a more authentic version of you, a more genuine version of you, a more freed up version of you, a more secure version of you, a more confident version of you, a more um, a more stable, secure, established version of you. And what's that going to look like? Well, it's going to look different. It's going to look different than your life looked in the past. If you were, let's say, I'll give you, for instance, with myself, before I got into recovery from codependency and went through healing of the family dysfunction and the abuse and all of that kind of stuff from my past, um, I was very much a people pleaser. Just whatever I had to do to keep peace. I mean, I bent over backwards. I said yes to everything. I did everything to just sort of just keep the peace and don't rock the boat. That was the way I grew up. That was the way I had to live. And then I got into recovery and I had to learn a different way on how to live. And one of the first things I had to do, which was really hard for me, was to say no. I had to start saying no to some very challenging, very intimidating, and very difficult people. And I had to draw the line and I had to learn how to set boundaries. And I had to become that person who set boundaries. I had to become a boundary setting person. I had to become someone who spoke the truth in love. My yes was yes and my no was no. I didn't say yes, but inwardly I really didn't want to. I couldn't do that anymore. I had to be more authentic and go, I like how Brene Brown, Brene, sorry, Brene Brown puts it, embrace the suck. It sucks for a moment when you're having to, when somebody asks you to do something and you maybe in some way you really want to, but you can't. You really can't do that. And you have to say no. You have to stop for a minute and you have to, it's almost like a count to 10 kind of a thing and just go, you know what, I'd love to, but I'm not in a position where I can do that. Um, or, I've had times when people have tried to give me things that I knew if you give it to me, I'm just going to turn around and throw it away. I can't use that. So I've had to come back with, look, I appreciate your generosity, but I'm not able to use that. Or, I really appreciate and I'm overwhelmed with your love and generosity, but I'm not in a position where I can receive that right now, or for whatever reason, and and another thing I had to do was stop explaining my life to everyone. um, I was raised by parents who demanded an explanation for everything I did and everything I said. Well, why did you say that? Well, you had to have meant XYZ when that's not really what I meant. And I had to live in this place of no one really knew who I was. No one knew who I really was. And I was living in this very protected place of, that not just, oh, gee, they're not going to like me. I don't care if you like me or not. I am who I am. Okay. And of course, now that I'm, in my 60s, I really don't care if you like me or not. You don't have to like me. Nobody pays you to like me. Just like, whatever. That goes both ways. Um, I'm not looking for that. Okay. I want genuine connection. I want to be able to connect with people, but not at any cost. Not at any cost. And I realized something in some of the relationships I've had with different people. I'm going to go with people who I was in ministry with in the past. And one of the things I realized is like you have to make a lot of concessions. You have to learn how to, when you're working with a team, you're 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 working with a team, and it's give and take. It's give and take. Sometimes, it's not always about what you want. You'll learn how to navigate, you'll learn how to negotiate, and you'll learn how to work together as a team. But what I realized when I was early in that process was because I worked with people were very strongly opinionated, very strong personality people, were very demanding and and very overpowering in the way that they came across. And a lot of times I would just concede. That's not working together as a team. That's not what being a team member is all about. When you've got someone who's always dominating everything, and I worked with a couple of people like that within, I mean, and let's face it, we probably all have. When it really comes down to it, they're bullies. They're bullying everybody else into getting their own way. And I had to learn how to stand up for myself. I had to learn how to be more assertive in the way that I talked. I had to work on my self-worth. I had to work on self-confidence. I had to work on me. And one of the things I've seen the Lord doing in a lot of people especially over these last few years, is that's a part of core work. Okay. When we're doing the core work, or I should say, when God is doing that core work within us, those are kind of some of the things that God's going after. It's where if you're the one who's been using coercion and intimidation and dominance as your way of getting your way, that's not going to work anymore. God's not going to let you to continue to get away with that. You're going to have to curb that stuff. But for those that always cower under that, we're going to have to stand up to that. We're going to have to stand up and hold the line. And that's not always easy with people who come at you with threats. Okay? It really isn't. And I'll touch on it a little bit here, but I mean, I had to deal with this with my parents. That's the way they were. Very intimidating people. And they were people who followed through on their threats. They didn't make idle threats. And learning how to navigate that and learning how to negotiate that, there's a strength that you gain. You become a different version of yourself. You become a more authentic version of you when you can stand in the face of someone who's being intimidated, who's using tactics of intimidation or coercion, or they're just simply a very strong personality may not be as demanding as you think they are just because you're intimidated by them. Okay? Um, when we have to stand up and go, I understand you're very passionate about that, and I can appreciate your passion, but I'm not in agreement with where we're going with that. That's not that's not how I see it. I see it differently. And the whole soft answer turns away wrath, that kind of thing. It's like it's not just, oh, I'm going to be this Minnie Mouse kind of, I'm going to go small, and I'm just not going to make any waves. No, that's not the same. I had to learn how to be assertive without being aggressive. I had to learn how to be assertive and not be passive and let other people walk all over me. And the more I did that, the more I became comfortable with that. But it also showed a truer side of myself, because who I am is a very self confident person. I am very confident in my ability. I'm very confident in who I am and what I think. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to go around spewing that on everybody else. But there is a time and a place for that. I don't walk into every relationship and demand my own way. But I also don't let someone else do that to me. And I think it's going to be really important for us going forward, because as we go into this new thing that God is bringing us into, it's going to call for us to be a more authentic version of ourselves, a more genuine version of ourselves, a more confident version of ourselves. We have to transition into that. And that takes work on our part. Okay? It really does. You know, um, instead of saying, well, yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that, when we're really not. Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Rather than just saying yes off the cuff, you know what? I'd like some time to think about that. And if they go, well, you know what? I need an answer. Well, then I'm sorry. Then the answer has to be no. Period. No explanation. Well, why? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You asked me for a yes or no answer. I'm giving you one. Period. That's the end of it. My answer ends it. Why? Because I said so. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this up. The final part of transition is when you actually step into the new thing, when you're actually in it. There's certain things that we want to try to pre-think on this side of it. Um, my son's been accusing me of that for the last 6 months, 3 months at least. Mom, you're overthinking it. Mom, you're overthinking it. And my argument back with that is no, I'm a thinker. I'm gonna think. I'm not overthinking it. I'm not obsessing over it. I'm thinking through the process. And rightfully he has come back to me a couple of times ago. Mom, I understand that. And some of this you're not going to be able to figure out until you're actually in the situation. So don't try to think about it. Let it go for right now. Let it go. Think about something else. Okay. Well, what can I think about now? What can I give myself to now? What can I um what can I spend my time and my energy and my attention on now? It's I need insight for the next phase, but I also need insight on how to navigate the confusion of this middle mucky part of the transition. We're almost through it. We are almost through it. And I want to say, I believe by the time we get to Pentecost this year, um, I do believe that we're going to see some um, some evidence of the new thing. If not already be in it, if not already at least be in the beginnings of the new thing. So having said that, and I do want to wrap this up, and you know, part of me wants to apologize for being so long-winded, but at the same time, if you've been listening to me before, yeah, this is the way it goes. So thank you to all of you who have hung in here to the very end. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The Lord bless you, right? But okay, so we're about to cross over into this new thing. Um, I, I'm I I want to try to do a blog post on this transition from Passover to Pentecost. I started it a couple of times, and one of the pitfalls that I have is falling into going into teaching mode and then teaching on everything under the sun. And I'm trying to stop doing that, okay? So I am trying to stay more on track and not get sidetracked with trying to teach everything. So I'm working on that. That's one of my challenges for going forward is to do this differently. So having said that, um, there is a transition. We are just crossing into the Hebrew month of Iyar, and so Passover is in the middle of Nisan, and then you have the month of Iyar, and then we go into the month of Sivan, and Pentecost is on the 6th of Nisan. And I'm sorry, on the 6th of Sivan. And um and today I want to say is I think it's the first of Iyar, so we still have about a month yet to go. There are things that are going to be much more evident. We're going to have clearer insight as we go through the month of Iyar. This is a time really to kind of position ourselves with the Lord to listen. It's in that relationship with God and in our intercession. Sometimes as intercessors, it's hard for us to shut up and listen because we just get into that intercessory mode and we're just going and going and going. This is a time to listen. It's a time to hear what God is saying. It's a time to be ready to receive instruction. It's a time to be ready to receive new revelation, new understanding, and to be repositioned and allow the Lord to not only reposition us physically, but also to reposition us mentally and emotionally, as well as spiritually. So I believe that as we're going through this next month, I think we're going to, at least for the next 28 days, we're going to be receiving, but we have to hear it. We have to quiet ourselves. And sometimes when because we're still in this place where things are a little bit confusing and we don't know, we can't see really clearly. This is not just a time. Hear me clearly on this. This is a time to listen. It's a time to use our spiritual ears to hear what the Spirit of the Lord is saying to us individually and corporately. We need to listen. That's different from seeing the vision. It takes a different practice, a different discipline to hear than it does to see. And sometimes God puts us in a season where we're not seeing clearly so that we are more heavily reliant on what we're hearing. But if we're in turmoil in the midst of this, see, confusion has a tendency to throw us into turmoil. We have to be careful not to respond to the confusion with turmoil, but to pull back into a place of peace, into a place of trust. So we have to trust the Lord with all of our heart. We have to come to a place of being quiet. If I quiet my heart, if I quiet my mind before the Lord, I will be able to hear. We will be able to hear what the Lord is saying, and only because we've heard what God is saying will we be able to step forward in the way that we're going to need to. because this is going to come by verbal. It, if God is saying it's time for you to hear me, then that means it's time for God to speak. And that's how God is choosing to reveal himself and to give his instructions and to give all the over the course of this month of Iyar, listen and connect with God through the practice of listening. And as you listen, you're going to hear what God is saying. He's going to open your ears. And if you're not confident of that, then just say, God, open my ears to hear you. Bring me to a place of peace within my inner man. Silence the thoughts in my mind. Calm my heart. God, help me to be at peace and to rely upon you for your grace to hear you and what you have to say. Cause me to be able to receive everything you have to say to me and give me the understanding I need in the midst of it so that I'll know what to do. I'll be able to hear what you're saying and know how to respond. Okay. So let's finish this off with saying again, thank you for hanging out with me today. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. This has been Betty with Beyond the Dalit. Shalom.